Greetings, Perf listeners. It's your old friend Satan here again, and I'm proud to introduce the News of the Damned.
Here he is again. He's always screaming. He's always screaming in terror, James, about the website.
That's the screaming affected user.
That's the affected user. There's poor quality crashing website in production. People might not have listened to the other episode. They might not know that Seth Elliott from Microsoft is joining us for this week's News of the Damned. Seth, what do you think of website outages happening to people? Are they innocent?
Well, it depends what website it is. I guess we could do with a few less websites out there.
I never thought of it that way.
Well, we know the internet is running out of space. I keep hitting that page that says the internet is out of space, or you've reached the end of the internet. So.
You've reached the end of the internet.
Yeah, James has already read it all, so that, you can take down whatever website you want.
That's right. You've reached the end of the internet. Please turn around and go back to AOL. Oh. Terrible. James, do you actually have some stories for us?
Yes. It wouldn't be an episode of News of the Damned without us having the ability to talk about the sites that just keep going down.
Just keep crashing.
And it wouldn't be a News of the Damned without us talking about something going on in the United Kingdom.
Yes.
So we're going to call this Glasgow 2014, The Return of Mothra. or the return of the British ticket meltdown, however we want to classify this. So this is for the Glasgow 2014 Commonwealth Games. A couple weeks ago, they opened up ticketing for an additional 100,000 tickets to the games, and this was a much anticipated rollout of new tickets. Evidently, a lot of people want to attend the games, and Mark, this is a very predictable event. We see this happening all the time. This pent-up demand. Everybody knows when it's going to go live. It gets turned on, and
website go boom.
Website go boom.
Yeah, this is not the first time Glasgow. This is the return, right? They keep trying again and again to right?
No. I think this is the first time we've had Glasgow, but we have some return candidates coming up.
Oh yes, okay.
On this News of the Damned, there's absolutely no doubt about that. The challenge that many of these sites have is that they're very dynamic on the front page. So as soon as you arrive at the front page, there's a lot of back end involvement in the system. You have pages being generated. You're not using content distribution networks effectively. You're allocating too many resources to people who have not yet decided they're on the revenue path to buy a ticket.
Yep.
And as a result, you exhaust resources before you get revenue.
Yeah, and it's this idea of queuing that if you got your hands on a couple of seats for the duration of your very short-lived session, those are your seats, even though you've actually sort of put dibs on them. And that whole concept can be handled in a lightweight ticketing token versus a full-on database transaction all the way to the back end to commit that. And so Think about other architectures that don't require full dynamic processing with your profile. Oh, gosh, leave the profile completely off these pages. You don't need to touch that data. Just get them through a couple of steps with this token thing, and you'll have a much more lightweight payload on it. But CDN use is another thing that we see. Just completely missing CDNs. Any of the normal vendors you would use, or even homegrown CDN vendors.
Oh, we had one a couple of weeks ago with Manchester United.
Yes.
Where essentially they had a CDN involved, but all their pages were dynamically generated on the front page.
Yeah. So, Seth, we have a question for you because we pick on ASP.NET quite a bit when it comes to the defaults for dynamic page rendering in a browser form. These things have changed a bit over the years since I was using ASP.NET 2.0 and things that are moving. What's it like now? Is ASP.NET defaults quite lightweight on the front end?
I don't have a lot of insight on that. I'm not doing a lot of ASP development myself, and I guess I haven't gotten to the nitty gritty of that. What is it? So you're saying the defaults the last time you used them were basically non-optimal. Basically, if you just sort of out of the box put up an ASP.NET page, you're going to be
essentially everything goes into state and has to be exchanged back and forth. And if you've got a really poor developer, a lot of objects on the screen, a lot of state to manage, then essentially you have large data flows and you have a lot of dynamic elements being handled. And it doesn't bode well for server resources.
Yeah.
Here's what I would wonder. Okay, so not having really any information here, I know that we're doing a lot of Azure hosting now. So like you actually stand up ASP.NET pages on Azure as a service. You just go into the system and you say, Bing Bang Boom, I want to create this page, and it creates. You're not instead of you deploying it, it gets deployed to the cloud.
Yeah.
And I would hope that we're collecting data on that, on how they're performing, and try to identifying the performance bottlenecks. Microsoft's now hosting it. So we have this wealth of data there. I would hope we'd be collecting it and using it to improve not only how we're hosting it on the cloud, but how we're setting our defaults for people that aren't using the cloud. That would be the ideal.
Yeah, and I think that in the old days, it's just even controls that were operating in a static way were being treated in view state, and just load that view state up. It got really, really big, and which is maybe fine for intranet applications or local applications. But the minute you threw it across the network, across the internet, things got really, really crazy slow. But we won't pick on that. Maybe Azure actually has a different way of rendering and putting those defaults and managing that for you. We can hope.
I'm hoping that hosting on Azure will provide insight for Microsoft into developer behavior in addition to tool behavior to provide an opportunity for education going forward for what is optimal.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That is what we should be doing.
Yes.
I'm not letting any company secrets out because I have no idea whether we're doing it or not.
But it's a good idea.
It's what we should be doing.
Right. So sorry, Glasgow. And if there's a ticket agency behind there, who shall remain nameless? Ticketmaster.
Well, I think that's one of the suspect agencies at least.
Yeah. Okay. What's next?
Next, Mark, is an actual repeat offender.
Okay.
And there's an incredible amount of irony in this. We're moving from the UK to the Indian subcontinent. The Indian school certificate exams. Last year about this time, the exam results board website melted down under the load of requests for people wanting to see how they did under the Indian school certificate exams. And this year it melted down again.
No improvement over last year.
So for whatever reason, the development staff was not able to take any lessons learned from last year and the user behavior on the site and apply some sort of strategy for handling that type of behavior again this year.
Yeah. So again, this is the one we just talked about, a similar one just a couple weeks ago, where you've got something that's rather private. There's probably layers of security or authentication to access your grades. And you don't want anyone else to get your grades, right? You only want the people that log in to get your grades. So I'm guessing there's an authentication sequence here that probably has lots of overhead or bottlenecks. And it's also something that often gets left out from your test environment if you're not doing real testing in production or even doing more analysis of what's happening in the real world. The load test lab maybe uses dummy accounts that don't have the same authentication, or maybe aren't running on the real either LDAP or Active Directory or whatever the lookup is for identity and authentication. So my guess is the website might be fine, but the authentication part might have actually melted down.
Well, Mark, heck, just from a dynamic lookup perspective, if you wanted to avoid that overhead, there's a finite number of students. At least for this series of the exam, you could pre-generate all of those pages as static elements.
Oh, you could, couldn't you?
You could. I mean, you'd have a lot of pages, but you could pre-generate them if you wanted to avoid a lot of load on other areas of the system that might be impacted.
Yeah, and then lock them down individually instead of having a dynamic authentication token, a handshake. Yep. Yeah, that could scale. But again, we're looking at sites where year over year, they probably didn't get budget in the IT department, or they just didn't think it was a problem.
How about splitting the difference, right? So you have all this in some relational database. Instead of pre-generating the pages, just put it into some lightweight, key value store.
Yeah.
Right, and then generate the pages from that, so that you don't have to incur the cost of the data lookup and all the joins and such.
I think Active Directory scales. You could just make it a property on their Active Directory user object.
And so just do an LDAP lookup, so as soon as they sign in, basically it's an attribute.
You're already talking to that system. Why make 5 more round trips?
Yeah, good point.
Just an old Microsoft guy. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's assuming it's Active Directory, but even if it's just straight LDAP, they could do the same thing.
Do the same thing.
There's plenty of cloud solutions that provide key value pair lookup. I know Amazon AWS has, I think, a simple database. It's called SDB. There's a few different ones out there. Or you could, deploy Berkeley BDB. It just,
Yeah. Yes. But again, these guys just didn't do anything from last year. So shame on you, people in India.
Well, I hate to say it, Mark, but the competition here is none. If they fail, it's not like the student's going to go to the next school certificate authority in the next county and look it up there.
Yeah.
You have to come back to the same site. So no competition, no incentive to improve.
Until somebody goes to their next collegiate interview. And they start saying, "What school did you come from?" "Oh, yeah, well, I want this job as a performance testing engineer. I come from a place where we really take that seriously." And they're like, "Wait, your school's website was down all the time? Didn't you volunteer to help them out or anything?" Yeah. Well,
I was on the team that built it.
I was. There you go. So sorry, the kids once again. Next year we'll see you next year.
So, Mark, candidate number 3. This comes from Mark's backyard.
Another one from my backyard.
Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. Titled, Who Won? Nope. Who's on second? This is the Luzerne County Elections Bureau. Melted down on election night.
Melted down. It's a heated election year. For midterm elections, in the stuff with Corbett and Tom Wolf and all these other seats are wide open. So Pennsylvania is just kind of crazy at this point. So here they went.
But the load cited on the Citizens Voice website and a couple of other websites talk about a load of 2,000 hits. It's like, okay.
Over what interval? 2,000 hits in a day?
They don't define the interval for one.
Well, see, that
the 2,000 hits, even over a minute. A hit is simply a request and a response. And if it's not a dynamic lookup, that could just be really bad style sheet and JavaScript calling other JavaScript calling other JavaScript. So, I mean, that could be really, really small. So I think this is a case of non-technical people attempting to sound technical in what they're writing about.
Or they fired the IT guys before they wrote the press release, and so nobody was there to really explain it.
It could be, but looking at the website, one, no content distribution network in front of it.
Nope.
For one, so you keep going back to the website, and the caching was not set optimally on the website, so it was having to reload a lot of the page components. Okay. If you have members of the press coming back constantly, they should not have to reload these. Quite often, and an unusual step, they were using a third-party service to host it, but the third-party service was still not able to handle the load. And Mark, I know you and I have spoken about these third-party services on election night and how you might structure a third-party service to actually host this stuff, such as having timeout on cache set once every 5 minutes on the data on the 5-minute mark. So even if people keep coming back, unless they're clearing the cache, they're just going to get the same data out of their local cache.
Put the little message on there that says, actual values may be up to a 5-minute delay. Please refresh your browser, et cetera, et cetera. There's lots of ways to get the user interface to that.
Yeah, and mark it to be highly cached in a CDN, so that's a CDN that takes all the load and heck, for local election results, say you're in Chicago, you're going to be dealing with 2 or 3 Akamai nodes that are going to be fronting that load instead of the Chicago Board of Elections.
Yeah, there's another thing another thing you want to watch out for on these sites is that you allow more broad queries. So you're a news agency, you're going to refresh a page where you get all of the current results across all the races on one page because they think about one round trip hit. The truth is, you could have multiple pages that are refreshing. You could have them in multiple tabs. There's lots of ways to get this to not be a multiple entity hit to get all of these scores or these latest election results.
Oh, sure. For the high priority items, you could have it cached on a 5-minute basis. For the lower priority, school board, you can have it on a 10 or 15 minute delay. So you can spread out that load. You can take different strategies and then offload a lot of the load to external providers. But for whatever reason, this third party was not engaged in using these solutions. And I don't know why, but election officials are not able to visualize with their IT departments how to manage this effectively as well. It's not rocket science.
And you know what? I think you could call it death by refresh button. Refresh, 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 refresh.
Well, even if they were doing a Control F5 to reload the whole page, if it was all in the CDN, if it was all in whatever your content provider was, at least you wouldn't get the load on the back end.
And out in Lucerne, Pennsylvania, they're probably all coming across 56K modems. You never know.
So these two examples, stand out in that they're both highly predictable when the peak's going to occur, right? Like, right after exams and election day. And it's actually fairly predictable what the total number of users is likely to be. So it occurs to me they could have just stood these up in production, maybe behind some sort of, firewall or password or whatever, and just pounded it with synthetic data at the expected load, and they really wouldn't have had to wait to the day of the election or the day after the exams to see, it exploded.
Which is exactly why Satan is applauding these IT people for being stellar in their punishment of mankind through.
But one thing that you'll see for all three of these items that we have right up front, and the fourth item coming up, is they tend to be monopolistic providers of a service. For the Glasgow game, for the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, you could only go to one place to get tickets. For the Indian school certificate class exam results, you could only go to one place. For the election results, you could only go to one place. Now, that doesn't excuse their behavior.
No, it explains it. And
it does explain a lot of it. But in the case of the Glasgow Games, there is a potential that if it's a ticket provider that was problematic, they could switch to another ticket provider, and next year they could improve their performance. But in the case of our repeat offenders on the Indian school certificate, they're simply not learning from their mistakes.
Yeah, and it goes back to business owners who are basically calling the decision to say, well, are we going to test or not test? And well, if the site crashes, where else are they going to go? Well, you know what? There will be competition. If you fail enough, somebody will step up and say, I could do this better and cheaper, and do it without the.
So, guys, we've got just a few months before the midterm elections. You think we could build something and host it completely in Azure with CDN caching for all the election boards around the country?
There's CDN caching already in Azure. It's
exactly. So host it there. Set the caching up properly for updates. Give them an avenue to update.
I think it'd take about 15 minutes.
Microsoft has like a whole building full of salespeople just for talking to governments and government entities. So set them loose. Yeah.
Seth, we'll have an offline discussion.
What's our fourth one?
Yeah. So next up is hello from Portlandia.
Portlandia. The 90s are alive in Portland.
Yes, keep Portland weird. And Fred and Carrie received a boil water notice a couple weeks ago from the Portland Water Board due to the identified presence of E. coli in one of the reservoirs. If you missed a previous story on the Portland Water Board, they drained a reservoir because someone who'd had a little bit too much of that local craft beer had mistaken a local reservoir for some place where they could relieve themselves.
There was a line at the porta potties. The honey pot line was really long. So there's
exactly.
The lakes right there. It's all natural. It's natural.
And we don't know if this was the same reservoir that was impacted by the draining or what, but for whatever reason, Portland Water Board issued a boil water until further notice. And, of course, everyone wants to check in to see how long they have to boil water and what the ultimate cause of this was, and if it was the same reservoir that someone took a leak in and everything else. And, of course, with all these people coming to the site, what do you think happened, Mark?
I think somebody peed in the reservoir.
Someone peed.
So someone peed on the servers.
Someone peed on the website.
Someone shorted the servers, yeah. And they could not handle the load, and they went down. Now, this is not the first time Portland has been in the news Mark,
Right.
if you recall, a couple years ago regarding the art tax in Portland.
I remember the art tax, and again, it was a similar thing where it's a notice, it's static content. I mean,
Yeah.
why a site purely caching rules? I don't know if you looked at the caching rules or not, but again, a notice about boiling water is a static page, and you could make it really lightweight, put it out in a CDN. You could send it out in emails, and people would send emails all over the place if they want with the same thing.
It
You know,
should be
get it out on the
it
was
should
on
be
the
the
news.
front page. It should be the page right in front, and then if you want to go to the more dynamic site, click OK to go to the main site.
Well, and to be fair, maybe they wanted to post updates there. So it would occur to me, instead of sort of using your own infrastructure, which is not built to handle that load, use something like Twitter for the updates, and then just embed one of those little nifty little Twitter embeds on your page.
Exactly.
There you go. You're leveraging someone else's infrastructure that's made to be highly scalable, and it'll meet your needs.
Except
Yeah,
the
you
only
could-
problem is here that the whale will die due to the presence of E. coli. No?
There's no whales
No?
in the freshwater reservoirs in Portland.
Oh,
I
okay.
know what whale he's talking about.
Yes, the Twitter whale will show up.
So now what gets me on this one, you're talking about a municipality that's also connected into serious like FEMA emergency management. I mean, they're going to obviously incredible lengths and costs to drain the reservoir. And there are communication channels, very formal protocols for communication channels for getting messages out like this.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, and they're not, they haven't used the channels and the protocols that they've determined because it's not quote unquote an emergency. But I got to say, E. coli, boil your water, that's pretty serious if the whole city has to do this. The second thing is, yeah, they're not taking simple advice. What a simple idea, hey, somebody else we can't use the normal FEMA channels to do this because it doesn't qualify for XYZ reasons. Let's do something on social media. I bet it was on the news. It's just they needed to have updates of some sort.
Yeah, it was on the news, it was on the radio, television, so all of the standard broadcast mechanisms to get the word out. But Portland is a very connected city. I mean, you got to remember, this is where Linus Torvalds lives, is in the Portland community. Very hotbed of open source development, just a few hundred miles south of a hotbed of commercial development. And you've got all these people, they've got all these devices. You get your notification on your cell phone. I don't know if you've ever received one of these emergency alerts on your Apple or your Android or your Windows phone, but you get them and you can click on them immediately once you receive them. And of course, what does it do? It takes you back to a website.
You talk about Portland being connected. I heard there's a pub there. I'm going to be there, I think, in October in Portland. I'm going to check this out, where you can check on every brew they have, like how much of it they have left, what the specific gravity is, and it'll tell you, based on your location, which bus you have to get on to get there to actually still get some of the beer before it's all gone.
Nice.
And if it's in a web service API, you could get updates very frequently, maybe. That would be good.
If it was WebSockets, they could just continue to push it to you.
That's true. Exactly. Hey, there is a fifth one, James,
Yes?
which was the FCC website
Oh, I missed that
that
one.
recently went down. So this is so John Oliver is a comedian and television star who came from the Daily Show. Now has his own show called Last Week Tonight. This week, and he's in his show. He was, recently the FCC had all this stuff about, cable companies campaigning ending net neutrality and all of the brouhaha about this, which I don't want to underestimate or be disrespectful. It's a valid debate. But he had shouted out to folks to say, if you want more information, go to the FCC website and, register your complaint. And the FCC has a site to do all this. And they actually sort of timing-wise had gone back to John Oliver and said, John, you're the reason our website crashed. These are supposed to be the experts, the FCC. We know how to make communication systems and all. Maybe they just know how to make regulatory bodies about communication systems.
Well, Mark, you and I have talked many times about these emergency situations, like the FCC, unexpected load from Portland Water Board, and I believe we even had a couple of situations of Nerf guns identified as real guns on college campuses, shutting down the campuses. When where
Yeah.
if you have these emergency situations with a large amount of unexpected load, have a plan in place where you can go to a lightweight website to survive it.
Yeah, and we have our episode on how to survive point load. It's just there you go. Just here's if you see a storm coming in a few seconds, have a static page you can put up with the basic information and redirects if you need it, and away you go. And you could have that at the ready in the load balancer. Just flip the switch and away you go. The one thing I was going to say is that John Oliver appeared on Charlie Rose's show, and Charlie, in his young, hip, internet-savvy ways, actually said straight up, John Oliver, you crashed the FCC website. And, of course, John Oliver, being smart enough, says, no, we didn't crash their website. That's a huge accusation. He actually, John Oliver said, we merely pointed people to their website, and the people went and crashed the website. It wasn't that, which is absolutely very accurate, but it is a Slashdot effect.
Well, Charlie Rose is that astute Carolina gentleman, which is why he asked that poignant question.
And Charlie Rose is not known usually for softball in that way, but he is talking to a comedian, and I thought it was very interesting that two completely unqualified people in the internet performance, scalability, and website crashing world are tossing the ball back and forth on who crashed who.
So some media people talking about technology and not knowing what they're talking about? Really?
Seriously. And we can help. That's why we have a podcast, which is a bunch of techno nerds about performance trying to do media stuff on a podcast. Touche!
So if they're going to talk about our topic, damn it, we're going to invade their space.
Exactly. Let's be clear. Go to the website in an orderly fashion, one at a time, so you don't crash it. That's what John Oliver should have said. Be responsible with your website usage.
It's a government website. Everybody take a number and queue up.
Well, that's why we used to put counters on the website so you could see what, if it was busy or not.
Oh, I thought that was so we could charge more for advertising on it.
Probably is in the end. All right, James, thank you very much once again for a couple weeks worth of News of the Damned.
Yes, thanks, James.
Yeah, so now for all of you who are being confronted by your project managers of why you should performance test, you now have another episode to play for them.
Seth Elliott, thanks for joining us on News of the Damned, sir.
Sure, it was fun.
Great to have you, man. And for everyone that's listening, please give a shout out to our sponsors, Flood.io and Cubic Load Pack. And do something nice for your IT ops guys. Tell them, that friend we have in marketing that knows what's coming? Call him up. Take the ops guy and the marketing guy out to lunch and just see, hey, do you know what's happening next Friday? And then the marketing guy goes, what? And the ops guy goes, what? And then you're the performance tester and you say, well, this is where the marketing guy needs to call the guy in ops and say, oh yeah, next Friday there's a huge thing happening that's going to blow up the website. And just try to build those relationships. Bring people together. Share the love about what's happening.
And one last reference for everybody for their reading list for the summer.
Yes.
Mark, you referenced Mr. Persig earlier.
Yes.
So I believe we need to point out that was an obscure reference to Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, an inquiry into values. So if you're looking for a great book on quality that is not apparent from the title, there you go.
But that was not in News of the Damned.
Yeah, I know. It's a very obscure reference to an obscure book that was made in a different podcast. I love it.
That's quite all right. It should be on your summer reading list.
Crazy book. I don't know if you've read that book. It's a crazy, crazy book. It didn't really have much to do with it.
I haven't, but I did add it to my reading list.
And that's an hour and 22 minutes of your life that you're never going to get back, Seth.
I will make you pay.
It'll be some. I'll bring some scotch in scotch.
In scotch, yes. You can pay in scotch.